Hello and welcome to the Tentance channel. Welcome. Today I've changed the scene a little bit. I just want a little bit of a change in the background, actually. We are going to deal with something very important that's been coming up of late. I hear it quite often, and I want to address it. Here we deal with controversies and propaganda, all kinds of issues that people bring up, claiming to be the truth. Actually, what we're talking about today. Has schooling suddenly become something worthless? Has schooling become something worthless, actually? And you hear a lot of talk, of late about schooling and how and why it is no longer relevant and the rest of it. I want to address that issue so that you understand before you make any decision that may impact on your life in the negative sense for the rest of your life. Um, Before we go any further, click on the subscription button. Right? Yes, you watching me. Yes, go right now. Click on it. It's free. You'll no deductions. It just will make you part of this family. So whenever an issue comes up, you'll be notified that a video has been loaded. And you'll be the first to know and all of that. Click the notification bell so that you'll be notified of issues. So you can have access to all my videos and the wisdom nuggets that are within them. Is schooling no longer relevant? Is formal education no longer relevant? Now, I think one of the basic misunderstandings that has led us to this point, and the reason why of very many um, entrepreneurs, especially, and financial coaches and financial empowerment gurus, seem to be saying education is not important, it's a simple issue, actually. There's a basic misunderstanding of what schooling is supposed to do. And unless that is dealt with, people will not have what schooling is supposed to do for them happen. Actually, what is formal education? You know, I wanted to observe something clearly. Anytime you hear somebody saying formal education is not really important, ask the person his background. You'll notice that most of those who say this are highly educated people. People who have gone to the university and have done even a first degree or more. Take note of this point I'm making, and you understand where these things are coming from. That the people who have had education already tend to say education is not important because they are now entrepreneurs, or now because the cost of education has gone up so high. They are comparing the input in terms of cost with the output in terms of results. So always observe these things before you jump into conclusion. The people saying education is not relevant are highly educated people. Let's flip the thing and go to those who are entrepreneurs who have not really gone to school. And you realize that such people at a certain journey, at a certain time in the journey of entrepreneurship, go back to school. I've seen musicians who made hits, groom other musicians who have now returned to school. People who didn't have school before. Interestingly, people who didn't have school before, once they make it in life, they go back to school. Another interesting thing to about it is that people who even make it without degrees, once they get to a certain height, they want to accord themselves degrees. They want to call themselves doctors. They want to call themselves professors. You know, why is this thing happening? And that's what we want to deal with today. And as I said, welcome to everybody who has joined us, even as we deal with whether formal education is still relevant. Now, before there was formal education, there was mentorship, there was apprenticeship. So, whatever trade you wanted to be part of, you followed your father, you followed your uncle, you learned as they did it, and by experience, you acquired those skills, and then you became competent. So basically, if you wanted to show the competence, all you say is that I've been doing this thing for 10 years or for 20 years, or that you say that I am the son of Gregor, who is a blacksmith. In other words, your reference would be your known father, your known grandfather, who was good in that trade. So that was your certificate. That was your license, actually. Now, sometimes competitions were held, and then the best person emerged. If royalty wanted your service, it was just competition. You did what you were supposed to do, and once yours proved to be better, nicer, more durable, yours was taken. There was nothing like certificates. Okay, education came in to mass produce competence. Let me repeat: education, I mean formal education, came in to mass produce competence, to mass produce skill, to mass produce giftings. You know, it's all of that which required to mass produce experience, all of that which required for somebody to be competent. Education has been structured to produce it in mass, en masse. So let's know what education is trying to do and see whether how it has been fashioned is accomplishing that task before we jump in into condemning education. Indeed, there are many things we do because we have gone to school that we do not even notice. Many studies have proven that educated people live longer than uneducated people. What is too much education? How much is too much education? Remember, the Bible says that too much studies can be weariness to the mind. But at the same time, the Bible also says that being too wise can be also wearing to the mind. In other words, anything with too with it means that you are going overboard. Water is essential in life, but too much water will drown you. So it does not negate the essence of education, but it's because its objective has been misunderstood. Now, most of the time, when we have motivational speakers speaking on education, they speak on the fact that in the industrial revolution, in the industrial revolution, we're talking about industrial revolution, we're talking about 18th century, the 1700s, and the rest. If you want to go back, maybe the farthest you can go is the 16th century, 15 something. You're talking about a period of just about 300 years. Yes, 300 years. That's what we are talking about. That's the industrial revolution, actually. But we have schools as far back as schools that were set up as far back as the 10th century, actually, um, where we talk about 1100s. So, what were those schools meant for? Schools that were set up in royal houses and castles, schools that were set up in churches and the rest. You know, and one of the very major group that formalized education alone was, especially in Europe, was a Christian group, the Christian sect. Religion is a major vehicle for formal education. Everywhere where there's a lot of formal education, there's a lot of religion. And here I'm not talking only about Christianity and Islam. I'm also talking about Buddhism, Hinduism, all of those religions which were predate Christianity and Islam also had a form of education. There are places in India now you can go. There were whole universities built around Hinduism. The other places where you can also go, part of India and the rest, where you can also see a whole university that was built to teach Hinduism. Remember. Let's go back. Why is religion so associated with formal education? Religion is associated with formal education because religion aims to produce people of the same kind. Note it. Religion aims to produce people of the same kind as the standard, as the master. People who show the same characteristics. The Bible says that to get the unity of the faith, that all of us may be one. So religion aims not to produce good and bad people, somewhat good, somewhat no. Religion aims to produce good people of the same kind. So you set up a system where they are all exposed to the same teaching, they are all examined, and they examined and then they are passed out as disciples of the same kind, so they can go and teach the same thing. Hence, the spread of religion with formal education. Somebody will say, but even earlier in China, they used to have examinations actually. Yes, and if you look at Chaldeans. In fact, if you look at the scriptures, when we go back to the book of Daniel, it talks about how the Chaldeans, and this predates even the ages. I'm talking about not some after Christ, I'm talking about before Christ. And some of these things I'm talking about with some of the Eastern religion, Confucianism, and the rest were also before Christ. So formal education in some form has been in existence for many years. In fact, if you look at what I'm saying, you look at the Babylonians and the rest. Bible says that they took the best students, Daniel and his people of noble birth, people without defect, people who had the potential to minister in the court of Babylon, and they schooled them for 3 years. After which there were tests for them to pass. They were supposed to be able to speak a language. They were supposed to have certain etiquettes, certain behaviors, and they were groomed. It's a formal education. It's a formal type of education. The difference is that the examination they took, was it practical or was it theoretical? Remember, in every civilization where there is writing, one of the core skills is to be able to communicate the culture, transmit the culture, transmit the knowledge through written text. So I believe that the Babylonians also had a form of writing. So they actually schooled Daniel and his colleagues on how to write. So this is a purest form of formal education. And after a certain number of years, they had supervisors who were teaching them, who were the eunuchs who were teaching them, and they were supposed to produce top quality students. And the Bible says that they were examined. Yeah, so we have Daniel chapter 1, verse 3, and it says, we're talking about how Daniel and his colleagues were selected. So there was a selection criteria, just like any other school. And then by reason of their selection, they were then schooled for 3 years. And look at the schooling they had and see how similar it is to our formal education. The king spake unto Asphanax, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel of the king's seed and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom and cunning in knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. That's Daniel chapter 1, verse 3. The king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were of the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belshazzar, and unto Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. They changed their names. Look at how anytime there's formal education, it seeks to change it. So it shouldn't surprise you that in any place where there's formal education, and there were colonial masters, we tend to have the names of the people that introduced us to formal education. Here we see the Babylonians introducing the Jews to formal education. But you should know the Jews also had a form of education, a religious education that they used to have, that you qualified when you turned 12. So you could read the Torah and you could understand the law. It was purely for obedience to Yahweh. But here the Babylonians had added some other things, actually. And what they had added to was science and things of the sort. Um, so verse 8, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord, the king, who had appointed your meat and your drink, for why should he see your faces worse lacking than the children which are of the sword? then shall he make me endanger my head to the king. Daniel said, then said Daniel to Melchizedek, whom the prince of the eunuch had set over Daniel. So Daniel had a supervisor. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. They had a supervisor, they had a teacher. Prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat. And as thou seest, deal with thy servant. So he consented. Daniel and his band of friends decided to change the curriculum because they wanted to reflect their beliefs. That is where the key thing is. That he consented to them in this matter and proved them 10 days. Everything was practical. Then at the end of 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus, Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink and gave them pulse. Um, and the pulse here is vegetables. So then they wanted vegetable. And it doesn't mean the Jews were vegetarian because the Jews ate meat. It was because those foods were sacrificed to idols in Babylon. So they wanted to avoid it altogether. 17. As for these four children, God gave them knowledge. So during the education, God gave them knowledge. As for these four children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now, at the end of the days, that is, at the end of the 3 years of learning, full university education, at the end, he said he should bring them in. The king said he should bring them in. The king decided to test them himself. Then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. In other words, there was a purpose to the education. They were trained to be in the court of Pharaoh, to be wise men, to be advisors, to be special assistants to the king. And the king himself tested them practically that they fit for purpose. So today's education, what it's doing obviously, is that it is actually trying to mass produce people who of the caliber of Daniel, what the caliber of Abednego, people who are wise, sound mind, who can understand issues, who can solve problems. That is all education is trying to do. That is why right from class one, kindergarten, all you're doing is that they'll put a problem there, they'll say solve it. They'll put a problem there, they'll say solve it. That is why they put you in groups to do tasks. They want you to learn how to work with others. I mean, that is why they send you the education excursion. They want you to have a feel of other environments, see how other places work. That's why they send you for competitions. All of these things are aimed to groom you to become competitive, to become resilient, to actually have certain skills that are good for life. In fact, the very analysis those people make, for which reason they then conclude education has not been that beneficial, came from schooling. That is why it's usually the school who complain about schooling, because they have been schooled enough to be able to do analysis to realize that comparing the output from schooling or so much schooling, and then those who do a bit of schooling, they are able to have the time to build up businesses, and they obviously do better in businesses than those who have spent most of their time schooling. You're going to examine all of these things. Is formal education, has it lost its essence? Is formal education important? From what I've said so far, formal education is what actually exposes us to our culture. What your grandfather did not know, that's where you learn it from books, you learn it from those whose job has been to study it. The kinds of exposure of science, if your parents were not science inclined, you get someone who is science inclined, who is your science teacher, who takes you through. Things to do with dances, culture. things to do with craftsmanship, things to do with interaction with other people. You are taught by that, social studies and the rest, by people who have studied that in that field. And then you have learned, you are taught to be an authority, you are taught to be and the rules and regulations, something you're going to do all throughout your life. Then you are pushed from state to state. So obviously, our very essence, our very behavior, our very culture, and everything about us clearly proves that we need education, that education is important. So there's just no two ways about it. The fact that education is important. What is the problem then with education as we have it now? That is what you and I should be talking about. So that's the first one that we are introducing the topic, and we just talked about whether formal education is still relevant in our days. And I've spoken this first part has been to talk about what formal education is intended for, and why, how it came about. And I will also go into scripture, Daniel chapter 1, verse 3, going all the way to 16, 15, even to 20, to explain that there was some formal education even in ancient time before Christ and after Christ, and that there's always been some formal education. The issue is whether the way formal education is now, whether it is achieving the purposes for which it has been set. So, God bless you for joining us for part one of this series on whether formal education is right. Remember, there's a major series that I've started that this one falls under, and it is actually finding the hidden meanings to everyday activities. Yeah, finding the hidden meanings to everyday activities. So today we have taken education, and the subheading was whether education is relevant. But then what we are doing is that we are finding the hidden meanings to the things that we do in school, so that if you are not getting the purpose, maybe it's because you are not getting the purpose of the thing you do in school. That's how come it's not bringing the effect that it's supposed to bring. God bless you as you have listened, and do subscribe to my channel and remain blessed even as we go to in depth into education and what it's supposed to do for you and I. God bless you. Love you.